I watched the city shrink behind me in the rearview mirror, the skyline dissolving into the horizon like ink in water. I kept waiting for the weight in my chest to lift, for the tightness in my throat to ease, but it didn't. Not yet. Maybe it never would. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just an empty apartment, a canceled lease, and a deactivated phone. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even about hurting her. It was survival. 2 days earlier, I was a man with a wife, a home, and a future. Now I was just a ghost. The day before I left, I came home from work to find my wife, Rachel, standing in the kitchen, her phone in her hand, her body tensing. She had that look, the one that said she had something to say but didn't want to say it. I had seen that look before, but I had never understood it until that night. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said. Those words, those 4 cursed words. I leaned against the counter, pretending I didn't feel the dread creeping up my spine. "What's up?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything before she even opened her mouth. She swallowed hard. "I think we need some space." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing keeping me from breaking apart right there in the kitchen. "Space?" I echoed. "Since when?" Rachel looked away. She had already made up her mind. She wasn't telling me she needed space. She was telling me she was leaving. And not just leaving me. "I've been thinking about this for a while," she admitted. I feel like I need to figure things out on my own. I feel trapped." Trapped. That was the word she chose. For 6 years, I had been her anchor, her support, the man who worked late and took care of things so she could focus on her dreams. And now she was standing in our kitchen, telling me she felt trapped. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to hold on to something, anything that made sense. "Is there someone else?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. Rachel's breath hitched. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. And in that second, I knew. She didn't have to answer. The truth was already there, hanging in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "Who is he?" She shook her head, her eyes pleading. "It's not like that, Ethan." Now I laughed again, this time bitterly. "Not like that? Then what is it like?" "Rachel." Silence. That was the moment something inside me shifted, the moment I realized I wasn't going to fight for this, because there was nothing left to fight for. She had already made her decision. I could have screamed. I could have begged. I could have torn the apartment apart in anger, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the woman I had given my life to, standing there like a stranger, unwilling to admit what we both knew was true. I nodded once. "Okay." Rachel blinked. "Okay? I get it." I grabbed my keys from the counter. "You want space? You've got it." And then I walked out the door. I didn't go back that night. I didn't go back the next day. And by the time she realized I wasn't coming back at all, I was already gone. It wasn't until I crossed the state line that I let myself breathe. The silence inside my car was suffocating, but it was better than the alternative. Facing the wreckage of my life. The moment I left, I knew there was no going back. No late-night conversations to fix what was broken. No heartfelt apologies to undo the betrayal. No second chances. Rachel had made her choice long before she spoke those words in the kitchen. Maybe she thought she was giving me a warning, a heads up before she officially moved on. Maybe she assumed I'd beg her to stay, try to salvage what was left. But I didn't. I walked away. And now, she was left with the one thing she never expected. My absence. I checked into a cheap motel off the highway, the kind of place no one asked questions. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner, but I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the dusty mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face drawn like I had aged 10 years in a matter of hours. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone. 56 missed calls, 42 messages, all from Rachel. The first few were just her saying my name, asking me to call her back. Then came the questions. "Where are you, Ethan? Please don't do this. Just talk to me. I know you're angry, but this isn't fair." Fair. The irony made me laugh, but it sounded hollow in the empty room. She thought this wasn't fair. I scrolled further. Then came the panic. Ethan, I'm really worried. Just tell me you're okay. If you don't pick up, I'm calling the police. I swear, if you don't answer, I'll track you down. I turned the phone off. She wanted to track me down? Too bad. I made sure there was nothing left to find. My bank accounts were emptied into cash before I left. My car was registered under an old address. My job? I sent in my resignation via email before I crossed state lines. By the time she realized I wasn't just cooling off for a few hours, I had already erased myself from the life we shared. Lying back on the stiff mattress, I stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out what hurt more. The betrayal or the fact that deep down, I had seen it coming. Rachel had been distant for months. I ignored the signs. The little shifts in her behavior, the way she started dressing up more when she wasn't with me, the way she put her phone face down on the table every time she got a text, the way she suddenly needed space, needed time, needed to figure things out. I had let myself believe she was just going through something. A rough patch, stress, anything but what it really was, her preparing to walk away. Only I walked away first. The next morning, I grabbed a burner phone from a gas station and checked my email. Rachel had sent a dozen more messages. Some were desperate, some were angry. The latest one was different. I get that you're upset, but you're being cruel. This isn't just hurting me, it's hurting you too. Running away won't change anything. Please come back so we can talk. Talk. That's all she ever wanted now, after making up her mind without me. But she didn't realize something. I wasn't running. I was gone. I don't know how long I sat in that motel room, staring at the peeling wallpaper, trying to make sense of what had happened. It was like my brain refused to accept reality. Like I was waiting for someone to wake me up and tell me this was all just a bad dream. But no one did. The only thing I had was silence. Thick, oppressive, and unrelenting. I had always thought of silence as peaceful, but now it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I tried to sleep, but my thoughts wouldn't let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Rachel standing in our kitchen, saying she needed space. Rachel flinching when I asked if there was someone else. Rachel staring at me as I walked out the door, probably never expecting that I wouldn't come back. Did she regret it now? Or was she just upset that I had taken control of the situation before she could? At some point, exhaustion took over, and I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the morning light was filtering through the grimy blinds. My head pounded from the lack of sleep, and my throat felt dry like I had swallowed sand. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face, and then I heard it, a vibration. My old phone. I had turned it off the night before, but now it was buzzing in the drawer of the nightstand where I had shoved it. I didn't want to look, but curiosity got the best of me. Missed calls, more texts, and one voicemail. I hesitated before playing it, half expecting Rachel to be sobbing, begging me to come home. But no, her voice was controlled even, but there was an edge to it. Ethan, this is getting ridiculous. I don't know what kind of point you're trying to prove, but it's childish. You're just making things harder on yourself. You want to run away? Fine. But you don't get to just disappear like this. You owe me a conversation. The least you can do is be an adult and face me. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, my jaw tightening. I owed her a conversation? What about everything she owed me? What about the years I had spent supporting her, loving her, believing in a future that, apparently, she had been planning to throw away for months? I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm. It was almost funny. She wanted closure, wanted me to come crawling back so she could feel better about what she had done. Maybe she expected an argument, some dramatic fight where she got to play the victim. Maybe she even thought I'd come running back, willing to work through it. But she didn't get to control the narrative anymore. I threw the phone onto the bed and leaned back against the headboard, exhaling slowly. I had to figure out what came next. Disappearing had been the easy part. The hard part was deciding what to do now. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just sit here. I grabbed my keys and headed out, my mind racing as I got behind the wheel. I had no real destination, just an overwhelming need to go, to keep moving, to put as much distance between myself and the wreckage of my old life as possible. The highway stretched out before me, endless and uncertain. And for the first time in years, I had no idea where I was going. Driving without a destination is a strange kind of freedom. At first, it feels reckless, like you're on the verge of making a mistake you can't undo. But then, after a few hours, it starts to feel like something else. Liberation. I wasn't tied to anything anymore. No schedules, no expectations, no one waiting for me to walk through the front door at the end of the day. I had always been a man who planned everything, who thought 10 steps ahead. But now I just let the road take me wherever it wanted. At some point, I stopped at a small diner off the highway, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease, where the waitresses all called you Han, and the regulars sat in their usual booths like they were part of the furniture. I slid into a seat by the window, rubbing the exhaustion from my face as a woman in her 50s, with a name tag that said Nancy, poured me a cup of coffee before I even asked. "Long night?" she asked, her voice full of the kind of knowing you can't fake. I just nodded. "Yeah," she said, setting the pot down. "I can see it on your face. You got the look of a man who's either running from something or looking for something. Maybe both." I gave a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "You always psychoanalyze your customers?" She smirked, leaning on the counter. "Only the ones who look like they haven't slept in a week." She wasn't wrong. I took a sip of the coffee, letting the bitterness pull me back into reality. It had been 2 days since I vanished. Rachel was probably losing her mind by now. I had ignored every message, every call, and yet I still had the burner phone sitting in my pocket like some kind of lifeline I didn't want to cut. Why? Why did I care? I had left for a reason. I had walked out of that apartment knowing I was never going back. So why was part of me still stuck there, lingering in a past that didn't deserve me? "Women troubles?" Nancy asked, raising an eyebrow. I exhaled slowly. "Something like that." She nodded knowingly, wiping down the counter even though it was already spotless. "Let me guess. She did you dirty, and now you're out here trying to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do next." I looked up at her. "Do you give this speech to everyone who walks in here?" She chuckled. "Nope. But I've seen enough men sit in that exact booth with that exact same look in their eyes to know a heartbreak when I see one." I didn't answer because what was there to say? I could have told her everything. About Rachel's sudden need for space, the hesitation in her voice when I asked if there was someone else, the voicemail where she had the audacity to say I was the one being cruel. I could have told her how I walked away without looking back, how I erased myself from the life we built because I refused to be the pathetic husband begging for answers he already knew. But instead, I just took another sip of coffee and said, "Yeah, something like that." Nancy didn't push. She just nodded like she understood more than I was saying and moved on to her next customer. I sat there for a long time, watching the cars roll past on the highway, thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. Then, against my better judgment, I pulled out the burner phone and turned it on. Immediately, the messages flooded in from Rachel. "Ethan, please just tell me you're okay. I don't understand why you're doing this. This isn't you. You can't just disappear like this. It's not fair." Then there was something new, a message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. Then my stomach dropped. "I know where you are." My hands tightened around the phone. My pulse pounded in my ears. For the first time since I left, I felt something I hadn't expected, dread. For the longest time, I just sat there, staring at the message. For simple words, but they carried the weight of a wrecking ball, slamming into the carefully built wall I had constructed between myself and my old life. "I know where you are." My first instinct was denial. No, it wasn't possible. I had been careful. I had paid in cash, used a burner phone, taken no direct routes. There was no way Rachel, or anyone for that matter, could have tracked me down. Right? A cold sensation crept up my spine, tightening around my rib cage like a vice. I glanced around the diner, suddenly hyper-aware of every person, every pair of eyes, every shadow cast by the flickering neon sign outside. No one was looking at me. No one seemed suspicious. And yet I felt watched. I swallowed hard and looked back at the screen. The number wasn't saved, and there was no name attached, just the message, sitting there like a loaded gun. My hands trembled as I forced myself to think rationally. There were a million ways someone could have sent this as a bluff. Maybe it was Rachel, throwing a desperate, last attempt into the void, hoping I'd panic and respond. Maybe it was a random wrong number. Maybe the phone vibrated again. Another message. You can't hide forever. That was it. I shut the phone off so fast it nearly slipped from my grip. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I shoved the device deep into my jacket pocket. Like burying it could make the words disappear. I needed air. Sliding out of the booth, I tossed a few bills onto the table and made my way toward the door. Nancy glanced up from behind the counter, her brow furrowing as she took in my expression. Everything all right, hon? I nodded stiffly. Yeah, just need to hit the road. Her eyes lingered on me for a second, like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. Then she nodded. Safe travels. I pushed out into the night, the crisp air biting at my skin as I hurried to my car. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered vehicles under the dim glow of a single, buzzing street lamp. My stomach churned as I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors the second I was inside. Taking a deep breath, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked different, not just tired, hollow, like a man on the run, which I supposed I was. I needed to go now. Starting the engine, I pulled out onto the highway, forcing myself to focus on the road ahead instead of the messages burning a hole in my pocket. But no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't outrun the thoughts screaming in my head. Had I made a mistake leaving? No, I couldn't think like that. I had to leave. There was no version of my old life where I could have stayed and kept my dignity intact. Rachel had chosen her path long before I walked out that door. But if she or someone else had actually managed to find me, then what? I tightened my grip on the wheel. It didn't matter. I wasn't going back. I'd keep moving, change motels, use a different name if I had to. I wouldn't be found. I couldn't be found. For the next hour, I drove in silence, my nerves stretched thin, my mind racing. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror felt like a threat. Every car that stayed behind me for too long made my hands clench around the wheel. Paranoia crept in like a slow-moving fog, making it hard to breathe. Finally, I spotted an exit leading to a small town I had never heard of. Perfect. I took the turn without hesitation, winding down dark, empty streets until I found another rundown motel on the outskirts. It was even worse than the last one. Half the neon sign was burned out, and the paint was peeling from the walls like old skin. But it didn't matter. It was anonymous. I checked in with a fake name, paid in cash, and took the key without making eye contact with the tired-looking man behind the desk. My room was at the very end of the hallway, the door creaking as I pushed it open. The air inside was stale, the carpet stained, but I didn't care. I just needed somewhere to exist for a few hours. Locking the door behind me, I dropped my bag onto the bed and sank down beside it, exhaling shakily. My fingers hovered over my pocket, debating whether to turn the burner phone back on. But I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to see another message. Instead, I lay back, staring up at the cracked ceiling, trying to piece together my next move. And then, a noise. A soft, barely there rustling coming from outside my door. My breath caught in my throat. I sat up slowly, straining my ears, my pulse hammering. Steps. Then silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there, heart pounding, listening. And then, just as suddenly as they had come, the footsteps retreated. Gone. But the fear remained. And for the first time since I left, I realized something chilling. I wasn't alone. I sat there for what felt like forever, barely breathing, listening to the silence on the other side of the door. My body was tense, my mind racing through 1,000 different scenarios. Maybe it was just another guest walking by. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I had gotten too deep into my own paranoia and was jumping at shadows. Or maybe, just maybe, someone really had found me. I forced myself to move, every muscle tight with adrenaline. Slowly, cautiously, I slid off the bed and crept toward the door, pressing my ear against the cheap wood. Nothing. No more footsteps, no voices, just the dull hum of the motel's flickering neon sign outside, casting ghostly red light through the thin curtains. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Then, with deliberate care, I reached for the doorknob and twisted the lock to make sure it was secure. The metal bolt slid into place with a quiet click, and I felt a flicker of relief, until I looked down. Under the door, barely visible in the dim light, was a shadow. Someone was out there. My breath hitched. I took a step back, heart hammering. The shadow didn't move. It just lingered there, motionless, watching. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it disappeared. The sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, faded down the hallway. I swallowed hard, my skin crawling. Who the hell had been standing outside my room? And why hadn't they knocked? Why hadn't they said anything? I should have called the front desk. I should have done something. But instead, I just stood there, frozen. My mind caught in a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Was it Rachel? Had she actually managed to track me down? Or was this someone else entirely? I needed to know. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay inside, I moved toward the window. Carefully, I pulled the curtain back, just enough to peek outside. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered under the yellow streetlights, their shadows stretching long across the pavement. Then I saw it. A figure, standing near the edge of the lot, half hidden behind an old truck, watching. Couldn't make out a face, but I knew. Whoever it was, they were here for me. I let the curtain fall back into place, my mind spiraling. This wasn't random. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone knew where I was. Someone had followed me here. I needed to leave. Grabbing my bag, I shoved my few belongings inside, my hand shaking. I didn't care where I went. I just knew I couldn't stay. Then, just as I reached for my car keys, my phone vibrated. I froze. I hadn't turned it back on. My burner phone. Slowly, with a sickening sense of inevitability, I pulled it from my pocket and looked at the screen. One new message. I hesitated before opening it, dread pooling in my stomach. And when I finally read the words, my blood ran cold. Leaving so soon? I nearly dropped the phone. They knew. They were watching me right now. Panic surged through me like a live wire. My mind screamed at me to run, to get in my car and drive until I was nothing but a blur on the highway. But my body wasn't listening. I stood there, frozen in place, my pulse thundering in my ears. I had to make a choice. Run now before it was too late. I didn't wait another second. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, yanking it open and stepping into the dimly lit hallway. It was empty. The silence felt oppressive, like the walls were closing in on me. I moved fast, my footsteps barely making a sound on the worn carpet. As I reached the lobby, I caught a glimpse of the night clerk behind the desk, his face illuminated by the glow of a small TV. He barely glanced at me as I rushed past. Out in the parking lot, I kept my head down, scanning my surroundings as I made a beeline for my car. My fingers fumbled with the keys as I unlocked the door, my breath coming in short, frantic gasps. I threw my bag onto the passenger seat and slid in, my heart pounding. Then, just as I started the engine, a figure stepped out of the shadows. I barely had time to register the movement before they approached my window. Tall, face obscured. I felt my stomach twist, and then they raised their hand. Not to knock, not to wave, but to place something against the glass. A folded piece of paper. I stared at it, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Whoever this was, they weren't here to attack me. They weren't trying to force me to stay. They were delivering a message. Swallowing hard, I reached for the paper, my fingers trembling. I unfolded it, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. Because it wasn't a threat, it wasn't a demand. It was a picture of me, taken tonight, standing by the motel window, looking out. Someone had been watching me the entire time. And now they wanted me to know it. Couldn't breathe. My fingers tightened around the photograph. The cheap motel parking lot spinning around me like I had been thrown into some nightmarish carnival ride. My own face stared back at me from the glossy paper, frozen in time, caught mid-movement as I peered out of my window just minutes ago. The angle was perfect. Too perfect. Whoever took this hadn't been guessing where I was looking. They knew. I forced myself to look up, but the figure that had left the photo was already gone. The parking lot stretched out empty before me, illuminated by flickering streetlights that did nothing to push back the creeping darkness pooling at the edges of my vision. I needed to move. My body felt heavy, weighed down by the kind of fear that wasn't just in my head. It was real. The kind of fear you feel when you know you're being hunted. I threw the car into reverse so fast my tires screeched against the pavement. Gravel crunched under the wheels as I backed out, barely pausing before slamming it into drive and peeling onto the main road. My pulse pounded so hard it felt like my own heartbeat was trying to strangle me from the inside. This wasn't just Rachel trying to get in touch with me anymore. This wasn't just some desperate attempt to make me come home. Someone had followed me. Someone had been watching me. The highway stretched ahead, endless and dark, the dashed lines blurring as I pushed past the speed limit. I wanted distance. I wanted space. I wanted to outrun the feeling clawing at the back of my skull, the sinking, gut-wrenching certainty that no matter how far I went, they would always be just one step behind me. I glanced at the burner phone sitting on the passenger seat, still turned off. Turning it on would be a risk, but what choice did I have? I needed answers. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, the soft glow lighting up the interior of the car like a ghostly presence. Immediately, notifications poured in. Missed calls, more messages, and one new voicemail. My thumb hovered over the play button. Then, before I could stop myself, I pressed it. A few seconds of silence. Then breathing. Not deep, not hurried. Steady, measured, as if whoever was on the other end wasn't nervous, wasn't rushed. They were waiting. Then, a voice, soft, controlled. "I see you." I nearly swerved off the road, my hands clenched around the wheel, my breath hitching. The voice was distorted, altered just enough that I couldn't tell if it was male or female. But there was no mistaking the message. This wasn't Rachel. This wasn't some wrong number. This was them. I gritted my teeth, forcing the rising panic back down my throat. Think. I didn't know who they were, but I knew one thing for sure. This was no accident. They had been planning this. They had been waiting for the moment I broke, the moment I reached for the phone, the moment I gave them the opportunity to remind me that they were still out there. I yanked the charger cord from the dashboard and threw the phone onto the floor. No more calls. No more messages. No more giving them the satisfaction of knowing they had gotten inside my head. But it wasn't enough. They had already won. Because for the first time since I left, I felt it. I wasn't just running anymore. I was being chased. And I had no idea how much time I had left before they caught up to me. The road stretched on ahead, empty and endless. But no matter how far I drove, no matter how many miles I put between myself and my past, I wasn't alone anymore. Someone was watching, waiting, and sooner or later they were going to make their move. The road ahead blurred under the glow of my headlights, but my thoughts raced faster than the car. The message still echoed in my ears. "I see you." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was a simple, terrifying truth. Whoever they were, they weren't just watching. They were waiting. But waiting for what? I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to focus on the road, trying to think logically. Someone had found me. Someone had been following me since I left. They had taken pictures. They had left messages. But they hadn't made a move yet. Why? I glanced at the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. No headlights, no shadows lurking in the distance. But I didn't trust it. I needed to stop. I needed to think. Up ahead, a rest stop sign flickered into view. It wasn't much, just a gas station, a few vending machines, and a couple of long-haul trucks parked in the lot. But it was better than nothing. I pulled in fast, cutting off the engine but keeping my hands on the wheel, scanning my surroundings. The place was nearly deserted, save for a truck driver sitting outside his rig, sipping from a thermos. He barely glanced at me. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone off the floor. I hesitated before turning it back on, but I had no choice. I needed answers. As soon as the screen lit up, another message appeared. "You can stop running now." I exhaled sharply, my stomach twisting into knots. This wasn't just some sick game. It was a message with intent. They didn't just want me scared. They wanted me to understand something. I typed a reply before I could overthink it. "Who are you?" A few seconds passed. Then, "Someone who's been looking for you." A cold chill ran down my spine. I swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the phone. I could feel it. This was the moment where everything I thought I knew was about to be turned upside down. I forced myself to type again. "Why?" This time, the reply came instantly. "Because Rachel told me to." The world around me froze. I read the words again, my brain struggling to process them. Rachel, my wife, the woman who had betrayed me, who had let me walk out of our life without stopping me. She had sent them? I barely felt my fingers moving as I typed my next message. "Liar." Another instant reply. "Check your email." I hesitated. Then, with trembling hands, I switched to my email. And there it was. One new message from an address I didn't recognize. I clicked on it and everything fell apart. The first thing I saw was a recording, a grainy, low-quality video. I pressed play. Rachel sat in a dimly lit cafe, across from a man whose face I didn't recognize. Her expression was desperate, her fingers clutching her coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I just need to know if he's okay," she said, her voice shaking. "I know I messed up, but he just left. No word, no sign. I've been looking everywhere. Please, help me find him." The man nodded, sliding a phone across the table toward her. "Are you sure about this? If we find him, what then?" Rachel's eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, regret, fear. "I don't know," she whispered. I just need to see him again." The video ended. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. Rachel had been searching for me, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because she regretted everything. And now she had sent someone after me, not to hurt me, not to drag me back, but just to find me. For the first time since I left, I felt something other than fear. I felt lost. What was I supposed to do now? The phone buzzed again. "She's waiting for you." I looked out at the empty highway, at the life I had run from. And for the first time, I wondered, had I been running from the wrong thing all along?